A safe life or an uncertain future? Should we choose a safe life, a life without many changes, a life where we do not need to rush forward? Or should we throw ourselves into an uncertain future, struggling with all our strength for ideals and for career? This is an unsolvable problem, the greatest survival dilemma that every human being must face after being born. As early as 1989, a classic novel gave us an answer. The novel is titled The Remains of the Day. Its English title is The Remains of the Day. It is a masterpiece by the British writer of Japanese origin, Kazuo Ishiguro, who later won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2017 and the Booker Prize. After that, this novel was adapted into a film and received many Oscar nominations. The Remains of the Day is the recollection of a man who spent his entire life struggling for his ideals and his career in order to become a great butler. He did very well. He succeeded. But in the final days that remained to him, he asked himself, what had he truly gained? The whole story is not complicated. However, it evokes a powerful emotional force. It forces you and me to look again at our own lives and to question ourselves. What exactly are we living for? Who am I? Who am I striving to become for my entire life? Will professional identity give us freedom, or will it separate us from our true selves? Identity as a label and a chain. Hi everyone. Welcome back to Slow English Podcast, a channel that shares knowledge for personal growth through meaningful books. I would like to share with you a topic titled Breaking the Chains of a Lifetime Through the Remains of the Day. Identity is the label of a person, but it is also the chain of an entire life. The main character, Stevens, has a father who was a butler during the prosperous period of Darlington Hall in England. Following his father's example from a very young age, Stevens set a goal for himself: to become a great butler. For 30 years, he devoted himself to this goal and tied his entire life to Darlington Hall. For Stevens, there was only work, and endless work. The story begins when the estate is transferred to a new owner from America. Stevens stays and continues to serve. However, the new owner, Faraday, does not value formality, likes to joke, and behaves casually, which makes Stevens, who is serious by nature, feel uncomfortable. Faraday plans to return to America for a period of time and suggests that Stevens drive out and relax for a few days. Although this is a chance to rest, Stevens believes that a master should not take the initiative to offer leave to a servant. Because of this belief, he struggles internally for 2 full weeks before finally agreeing. How strange. Why did he hesitate for so long? This is because, deep inside Stevens, there is a strong desire to do everything possible to preserve his identity as a great butler. This identity has always haunted him. It is the label of his life, but it is also the chain of his entire existence. Space, time, and the prison of identity. Why do we say that identity can become a chain? To understand this, we need to look at the meaning of space and time in relation to professional identity. Human beings usually recognize reality only within a limited space and a limited time. Within this framework, we imagine specific social roles and then place the robe of identity upon ourselves. Identity helps each individual gain a stable social position and a sense of belonging. However, it also limits our personal behavior. Just like Stevens, who worked inside Darlington Hall, a fixed and enclosed space, for more than 30 years. In his life, only two things clearly existed. The first was to provide proper service to the gentlemen and ladies who visited the estate. The second was to engage in intense debates about professional greatness with other servants or butlers of the guests. Some people might think, isn't a person who dedicates himself completely to work, who remains firm in his ideals and career, a respectable and admirable person? But in reality, this is only an illusion of identity, created by human beings themselves, inside a limited and fixed living space. There is a truth that all of us must face. We all have to work in order to live, and we all force ourselves onto a path where we strive to establish an identity, just like Stevens. I am a manager. I am an investor. I am a doctor. I am a teacher. This is how we usually answer when someone asks us, "Who are you?" Every person in this world has an identity that exists outside of their true self. That identity comes from our profession, and we attach a great deal of meaning to that title and label. When a person has a strong identity, everything they say and everything they do revolves around that identity. In Stevens, the belief, "I am a great butler," was extremely solid. The stronger this belief became, the more it pushed him to ensure that everything, his words, his actions, his clothing, and his interactions with others, matched the dignity of a great butler. This meant maintaining the image of a gentleman who could always protect his career, even if doing so went against his true emotions. Suppressed emotions, lost love, and lost family. In order to always succeed at work, Stevens had to suppress his true emotional world. He restrained his natural desires and turned himself into a machine with no spiritual needs. In his heart, emotions were seen as something dangerous, something that could erode the dignity of a great butler. He even felt a sense of disgust toward beautiful women, and he constantly avoided his true love for Miss Kenton. Even when Miss Kenton told him that she was about to get married and tried to persuade him to stop her, Stevens still responded in a cold manner and only offered his congratulations. Miss Kenton cried and married in disappointment and despair. Not only personal love, but also family relationships were sacrificed. After Stevens's father was injured and could no longer continue working as a butler, Stevens kept a cold mind and told his father that he was no longer suitable to serve as a butler. Their father and son relationship remained cold until the very end. On the day his father was dying, a large conference was being held at the estate. As a butler, Stevens chose to prioritize work. Even after hearing news of his father's critical condition, he continued his duties. When he finally finished his work, his father had already passed away. Later, as he wandered outside in a state of shock, he met his former master, who asked him if he was all right. Stevens still pretended to be calm and said, "I am fine. I am all right, sir." Even more difficult to understand is that, more than 30 years later, when recalling his father's death and his own emotional coldness, Stevens still did not feel regret. Instead, he regarded this as a reflection of his professional achievement. He believed that he had controlled his emotions very well. He even felt thankful that he had passed this test and demonstrated the dignity of a great butler. This is truly frightening. Some people go through half of their lives without realizing that they are living inside an illusion created by their own identity. They achieve career success. They gain a high status. They obtain everything. But what remains of life? Freedom, awareness, and the meaning of life. Many people are not very different from Stevens. They struggle for their entire lives, and in the end, they realize that it may have meant nothing. In reality, many people do find meaning in the work they do. However, identity becomes a chain when you have to force yourself, to disguise yourself, to ignore your true emotions just to succeed in that job. In such cases, it becomes extremely difficult to recognize our own self-deception. As long as we remain trapped inside a fixed space, we will continue to be limited by that space. From time to time, we should allow ourselves to step into a different space, a space that is farther, higher, and wider. Only by doing so can we step outside our fixed beliefs and truly examine ourselves. For Stevens, traveling to the west of England was not simply a journey for relaxation. Rather, it was an opportunity to escape from the prison of identity that his former self had constructed. Leaving the enclosed space of Darlington Hall, a place that represented the dignity he pursued for his entire life and the glory of the past, and entering a vast, unfamiliar natural space, allowed Stevens to reflect on himself and explore the true meaning of his own existence. On the first day of the journey, Stevens met an elderly man, thin with white hair. The old man said, "As long as your limbs and chest are still strong, it is best to climb the mountain and look around." Stevens followed his advice and climbed the steep mountain. At the top, a beautiful countryside spread out before his eyes, stretching for miles. The air was fresh. The scenery was vast. In that brief moment, it felt as if the deepest fears inside him had dissolved. Through this shift in space and time, Stevens was given a chance to expand his inner world. He allowed himself to enter a different space, not only to immerse himself in silence and return his soul to a pure state within vast nature, but also to encounter people with identities different from his own. Stepping out to meet the world is also a way for us to reflect on ourselves. For Stevens, as a butler serving the upper class, the people he regularly interacted with were either gentlemen and ladies, or other servants and butlers. Deep down, he could not truly enter the upper class, nor could he fully integrate with the servants below. The only thing he could do was supervise others and ensure that everything in the estate ran smoothly. Over time, his attitudes and behaviors, formed within this narrow space, became part of his very nature. He always maintained a certain distance, protecting his true emotions from others. However, after leaving the familiar Darlington Hall and entering the vast natural world, filled with the warmth and simplicity of ordinary people, the contrast between their way of life and his long-formed behavior stimulated him to confront his inner self. It awakened his ability to accept himself and to reflect inwardly. During this journey, his deeply rooted beliefs also had a chance to be questioned. Stevens heard negative evaluations about Lord Darlington, the man who had once been a spiritual symbol of greatness in his heart. The beliefs that supported his life began to collapse. He realized that the values represented by Lord Darlington, and even the values of the entire society at that time, were nothing more than decaying illusions that suffocated human nature. At the end of the story, Stevens used the most important moment of his journey to meet Miss Kenton one last time. From the bottom of his heart, he felt that the true purpose of this journey was to find the woman he loved. For the first time, he did something by following the call of his heart, rather than the demands of his profession. He began to speak honestly with her, paid attention to her emotions, and tried his best to invite her to return to the estate. Even after hearing her refusal and her wish to remain stable in her current life, Stevens still tried one more time. At this moment, he was no longer a Stevens who only saw identity. He could not bear to lose her again, nor did he want to turn himself into an emotionless body, without heart or soul. Later, sitting alone on the beach, in a foreign space, a conversation with a man of similar age once again prompted him to reflect on the rest of his life. He finally understood that the dignity he had been proud of his entire life was nothing more than blind obedience and self-deception. He had missed love. He had ignored family. The tireless effort to fulfill duties had been meaningless. Regret, sadness. In the end, what remained of the days gone by? Many of us are no different from Stevens. We strive for an entire lifetime, only to realize later that it may have held no real meaning. In truth, many people do find meaning in work, but identity becomes a chain when you have to struggle constantly, pretend continuously, and abandon your true feelings just to achieve success. We rarely recognize our own self-deception. If we keep ourselves locked inside one fixed space, we will remain limited. Even if the space changes, even if the identity changes. A writer once said, "Consciousness is true existence." Just like Stevens, only when a person becomes aware that no matter what identity they hold, they should always turn inward and peel away layers of falsehood and disguise, can they truly escape the chains of identity. Allowing yourself to leave the old space gives you a chance to find yourself again. But whether you truly gain freedom depends on awareness. Your own awareness of freedom. As the day comes to an end, it is best to seize the present moment. This story is not only meant to help us reflect on professional identity, but also to reshape our attitude toward regret in life. We all face many choices. Some choose the calm of the night, yet regret losing the light of day. Some choose to travel far away, but feel fear when leaving the safe zone. Some devote their entire lives to career, only to realize later that it meant nothing. Just like Stevens. After crossing mountains and rivers, after tasting the many flavors of life, we may discover that the things we once believed to be the most important are not necessarily essential. we may suddenly realize that the beliefs that haunted us, the dreams we were willing to devote our lives to, were nothing more than a joke. Perhaps in both your life and mine, there are problems that cannot be solved, mistakes that cannot be fixed, and people who are destined to leave. When facing such moments, the only thing we can do is to reconcile with the past and offer our very best to the present. Let the river continue to flow. See what you have lost as a form of practice. See what entangles you as a beautiful adventure. Only then can you allow yourself to move forward and approach the true meaning you are seeking. Returning to the question at the beginning, should we choose a safe life with few changes or rush into an uncertain future, struggling for ideals and career? By now, perhaps you already have your own answer. We know that we must work to survive, and we must have a professional identity. But instead of limiting ourselves to titles and material standards, power, status, fame, let us give our identity a higher meaning. You can be a guide, a contributor, a giver, a minimalist, a loving person. Let your identity be a glow, not a chain. When the meaning of life is elevated, you will no longer be bound by identity. You will not live only for profit. You will not remain stagnant. You will not obsessively chase fame or greatness. You will live more truthfully and more harmoniously with your professional role. May all of us periodically step out of our limited spaces, stand somewhere farther, higher and wider, and reflect inwardly to see whether something is chaining our feet and binding our hearts, so that when we face the question, "Who are you?" we can answer immediately, "I am a light born into this world to shine." Thank you for listening.